Over the last year, in the United States itself, the home of Apple, iPhone sales have decreased by a massive 11% in 2025. Meanwhile, Samsung grew by 38% in just one quarter. And for the first time in modern history, the market share gap between Apple and Samsung in the US has narrowed to an alarming extent. Ultimately, what did Apple do wrong? Well, perhaps the iPhone is still a good phone, but that's okay. Sometimes it's not enough, especially in a world where users are starting to crave novelty, difference, and that feeling of being wowed again. In this video, we'll take a look at the numbers. Apple doesn't want you to notice the trends Samsung is quietly capitalizing on and why loyalty and technology don't fail because of betrayal, but because of boredom. If we rewind to around 2014, the US smartphone market witnessed a tense but quiet showdown, not through noisy advertising, but through screen size. Something that seems simple, yet directly impacts Americans' daily usage habits. On one side is Samsung. They are constantly releasing large, spacious, and airy phones, much like moving from a cramped apartment to a sun-drenched open living room. Samsung is betting on a very ordinary trend. Americans are watching more videos, reading more, and want to see more visually appealing content. On the other side is Apple. At that time, the iPhone remained true to its small, compact, and standard-setting screen, almost to the point of being conservative. Apple is not in a hurry. They believe users will adapt, just like they adapted to touch keyboards in 2007. But then the pressure began to mount. iPhone users are starting to ask, why is my phone more cramped than the Samsung of the person sitting next to me? And Apple responded. The iPhone 6 was released bigger, wider, breaking a design philosophy that had lasted for many years. In just one generation, Apple turned the tables. The iPhone 6 became one of the best-selling iPhone models in history, while Samsung, although not unsuccessful, lost its clear competitive advantage. A big lesson: Apple doesn't need to be the first mover. Apple just needs to be on time. But this is the crux of today's story. Because more than 10 years later, that familiar setting is eerily repeating itself. Samsung once again leads in screen form factor. This time, not just bigger, but foldable and transformable. Meanwhile, the iPhone remains a familiar rectangular glass slab, refined bit by bit, year after year. The question is no longer whether Apple has ever won, but rather, will the timely tactic still be effective when users are changing faster than ever before? And that's when we need to look at the current numbers to see if history is repeating itself or if it's preparing to take a completely different turn. At first glance, the figures for 2024 to 2025 are not shocking. There was no spectacular collapse. No company has disappeared from the map. But if you look long enough, like watching the minute hand move, you'll realize the balance is tilting little by little in just a short period of time. Samsung's market share in the US increased from 23% to 31%. Imagine it like this. For every 10 new phones sold, Samsung gains almost one more compared to before. In a saturated market like the US, that's not growth. That's taking market share from someone else. And the others here are not hard to guess. Apple's market share decreased from 56% to 49%. This number is still enough for Apple to be at the top, but it's like a marathon runner who is still in the lead but starts to breathe heavily. No one is surpassing you, but the gap is closing. What caught the attention of analysts wasn't how many iPhones Apple sold, but who was buying the next iPhone and who wasn't. Because this isn't an emerging market where users are upgrading their phones for the first time. These are the Americans who have been loyal to the iPhone for many years. When they switched to Samsung, it wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision, but a considered one. A question began to echo in financial boardrooms. If the iPhone is still selling tens of millions of units each quarter, why is Wall Street so worried? The answer lies in momentum. Apple is like a large ship. It's still moving fast, but it's slowing down very slightly. Samsung is like a smaller ship, but it's accelerating at the right time. And in the world of technology, investors aren't afraid of slowness. They're afraid of slowness at the wrong time. The important question is no longer whether Apple is losing, but rather, what is driving Samsung forward? And is it something that Apple hasn't been able to do or hasn't wanted to do at this time? To answer that, we need to look deeper into product strategy, where two paths begin to diverge significantly. If you only look at the financial statements, you might think everything is still fine. With Apple, iPhone sales increased by 13% compared to the same period last year. Profits are still enormous. The brand is still strong. So why is Wall Street turning its back? Since the beginning of the year, Apple's stock has decreased by approximately 7.5%. During the same period, Samsung increased by over 30%. Imagine the stock market as a radar station. It doesn't measure where you are standing. It measures which direction you are moving in. And radar is detecting something that is making investors uneasy. Apple's momentum is slowing down while Samsung's momentum is accelerating. This is the paradox that confuses many people. Apple still sells tens of millions of iPhones every quarter, but investors don't buy the past. They buy the predicted future in the eyes of Wall Street. Apple is like a giant container ship, stable, reliable, but very slow to change course. Samsung is like a high-speed train, smaller, more agile, and willing to try new paths, even if not all of them are safe. And in the tech industry, timely testing is more important than perfect testing. Investors are starting to wonder, if the iPhone remains unchanged for years, where will the next growth come from? If AI becomes a determining factor in experience, who is better prepared to leverage it? And if the device form factor changes, will Apple lead or have to play catch-up? The stock didn't fall because Apple is failing. It declined because the growth story became less clear. Meanwhile, Samsung is telling a different story. Hardware innovation, a wide product range, bold experimentation, and, most importantly, showing they are ahead of the curve. Wall Street doesn't need to know who wins today to understand why Samsung's future story is more compelling. We need to look at how they sell not just phones, but choice. If you walk into a phone store in the US in 2025, it will feel like standing in front of two completely different types of banquet tables. At Apple, you see a neat menu, a few familiar options. Clean, easy to order, almost effortless. And on the Samsung side, it is an endless buffet, from no-frills dishes for the practical to chef-prepared dishes that make you stop and look for an extra 10 seconds. And here's the important secret. Samsung doesn't just sell phones. They sell the feeling that I have the right to choose. Samsung casts a net so wide that it almost doesn't miss anyone. Low-price segment Galaxy A, targeting those who want something that's good enough, durable, and affordable. Premium line Galaxy S25 for those who want a flagship but still be practical. And the ultra-premium segment Z Fold and Z Flip for the group wanting something different with a wow factor. Their price range goes from around $650 up to $2,400. If you were to translate that into real life, it's like Samsung offering everything from a basic sedan to a limited edition supercar, all within the same showroom. Although Apple may still be in the lead, they operate like a company that chooses to take the straight path, a series of rectangular glass-paneled devices. The price ranges from $820 to $1,599. And most users are just choosing the regular version or the more expensive version. That's not wrong. But in the context of American users facing pressure from the cost of living plus the boredom that accumulates over the years, fewer options suddenly become a disadvantage. Middle-aged customers usually don't change phones because of trends. They switch because of battery, screen, usability, the perceived value compared to the money spent, and most importantly, the feeling that they were buying something that was right for them, not something they were forced to choose. So the question for you is, if you were the buyer today, would you prefer a fixed menu or a buffet? And how do you think that's helping Samsung gain market share from Apple? But the choice is only superficial, and the next part will touch on something even more sensitive. Why? iPhones have looked almost identical for years, and how high is the price of that familiarity? If you put an iPhone from 2017 next to an iPhone from 2025, most casual users will immediately recognize, oh, it's still the same. It's not because Apple stood still, it's because they refined it so perfectly that it's hard to notice the change. For nearly a decade, the formula has remained virtually unchanged. A familiar rectangular glass block, the large screen in front getting brighter and brighter, the rear camera cluster adding a circle and a new specification each year. Everything is beautiful, very beautiful. But just like a 5-star hotel you've stayed in too many times, the service is still good. The bed is still comfortable, but the sense of discovery is gone. And here's the crucial detail that Apple rarely states. Outright familiarity doesn't kill sales immediately, but it kills enthusiasm in surveys of middle-aged American users. A recurring answer is, I don't hate the iPhone, I just don't have a strong reason to upgrade anymore. Let's translate that into everyday life. If you're invited to the same party every year at the same location with the same music and the same menu, you can still go, but you'll approach it with a completely different mindset than the first time. That is the problem Apple is facing. While Samsung constantly experiments with new shapes and new ways of use, Apple chooses the path of absolute safety. Supply chain security, safe for the ecosystem, safe for the familiar experience of hundreds of millions of users. But that safety also has a downside. The iPhone becomes predictable. Today's users can almost predict what next year's iPhone will look like, how much it will weigh, and where the camera will be placed. When a product loses its element of surprise, the purchase decision begins to shift from emotion to reason. And when buying with reason, people start to ask, with this money, do I have any other options? Is a foldable screen more convenient for reading, watching, and working? Why should I have to buy back a design I've been using for 5 or 6 years? Apple has maintained loyalty, but loyalty is not an unbroken monolith. It's like ice. Very hard, very clear. But the slightest change in temperature will cause small cracks to appear first. And Samsung is doing one thing right. They're not trying to break that ice block, they just need to warm it up. The question for you is, are you still excited when you see a new iPhone? Or are you just waiting to see what's different in the next section? We'll see why. Foldable phones, once considered a gimmick, are becoming an emotional outlet for those who are too familiar with the traditional iPhone. In 2019, foldable phones were once considered a misstep in a magic show. Samsung introduced its first foldable device with high expectations. But the reality was harsh. The screen broke, the hinge was weak, and negative reviews flooded the media. At that time, American users viewed foldable phones like a concept car placed in the middle of an exhibition. Beautiful, unusual, but no one believed they were meant for daily use. And then the foldable phone was labeled a technological showpiece. But the interesting thing is, Samsung didn't back down. They quietly returned to the laboratory like an aircraft manufacturer who had experienced an accident, not arguing with public opinion, just tightening each bolt. By 2025, the picture was completely different. The Galaxy Z Fold 7 no longer appears as a product designed to shock, but as a mature device. Pre-orders increased by 25% compared to the previous generation. Actual sales were nearly 50% higher. These numbers have translated into real life, like a movie that was once disastrously criticized suddenly becoming a box office hit in its sequel. But the real turning point didn't come from advertising. It came from the internet. A user live-streamed the folding of the Z Fold over 200,000 consecutive times. No background music, no script, just repetitive action, like a mechanical torture experiment. The video was quickly shared, and one version reached over 15 million views on YouTube. No slogans needed, no promises needed. Durability speaks for itself. Social media data shows that within a month, Samsung's premium devices were mentioned over 50,000 times, with 83% of those mentions being positive or neutral. For the media, this is a rare moment when trust is built not on words, but on observable behavior. And most importantly, foldable phones are no longer bought out of curiosity, but for their functionality. They open for reading like a tablet and fold up to carry like a phone. For users who are tired of the familiar flat glass block, this is a sense of changing space, like moving from a one-window room to a room with a balcony. The question for you is, if a foldable phone is durable enough, practical enough, and different enough, what reason is there to call it a toy? And when the hardware finally caught up with the promise, a bigger question emerged. Are foldable phones just a new form factor, or are they the perfect platform for the next era? The era of AI. For many years, smartphones were designed around a very simple question. How can everything be packed into a thin sheet of glass? But AI has reversed that question. Now the issue is no longer about miniaturization, but rather, how can I have enough space to operate effectively? And this is where the game begins to branch out. Samsung, along with the Android ecosystem, is approaching AI as a layer of living assistance that coexists with the screen. Apple, on the other hand, is still trying to cram AI into a shape that's already too familiar. This difference isn't noisy, but it's very clear if you look closely. Let's take a simple example. AI-powered search on new Samsung devices. Users can circle anything on the screen to ask AI to explain, look up, or expand on information. The original content is still there. AI appears in parallel, not obscured. It doesn't interrupt the flow of thought on the foldable screen. This experience is like working on a large table. On the left, the content you are viewing. On the right, AI analyzes, suggests, and supplements. It's like reading a newspaper with an assistant sitting next to you, ready to answer when you point to any paragraph. What about the iPhone? AI is still present, but it's being squeezed into a narrow space. Every time I call the assistant, the old content disappears. The context is interrupted. It's like reading a book, but you have to close the book every time you want to ask something. The issue isn't about whose AI is smarter. The problem lies in the hardware shape, which is limiting how AI is used. Experts call this experiential friction. As AI becomes more powerful, friction becomes more apparent. If the display space is not flexible enough, Samsung, with its foldable screens and true multitasking capabilities, is inadvertently gaining a strategic advantage that isn't confined to a single window. Apple understands this, but it is bound by its own success. The iPhone ecosystem is optimized for a single screen, a single flow of experience where everything must be absolutely consistent. The question is Apple waiting for AI to be mature enough for the iPhone, or are they waiting for a new iPhone form factor to give it a stage? And if the answer is the latter, then the next chapter won't just be about AI anymore, but about when Apple will be forced to change its hardware form factor and how high the cost of waiting will be in the private conversations of investors. There's a saying that's often repeated when talking about Apple. Never be quick to conclude that Apple has lost, because history shows that Apple rarely jumps into the game when it's still chaotic. They stood outside, observing, recording, measuring, and only stepped in when the rules of the game were clear enough to win big. The iPod wasn't the first music player. The iPhone wasn't the first smartphone. The iPad wasn't the first tablet. But every time it appears, Apple turns a complex technology into something simple enough for millions of ordinary users to adopt. And this time, too, behind the scenes, Apple is reportedly preparing some unrevealed cards. A super thin iPhone only about 5.5 millimeters thick, aimed directly at the wow factor of design. A foldable iPhone, potentially launching in 2026, with an expected price of $1,909 or more. If we use a familiar analogy, Apple is like a seasoned poker player. They didn't go all in early. They patiently watched their opponents, reveal their hands, observe market reactions, and then place large bets. Samsung took a risk. They tested early. They suffered a public defeat. They paid tuition with imperfect products. Apple is the opposite. They let others take the risk for them. But this very patience is raising an uncomfortable question. In a world where innovation cycles are accelerating, is waiting still a strategy? Or has it become a burden? Today's users no longer wait 5 to 6 years to be wowed again. They are used to technology changing every year or even every quarter. When Samsung made foldable screens durable and practical enough and AI began to shape device usage, Apple's wait started to have an opportunity cost. Apple isn't losing users en masse, but they are losing users who are willing to try new things. The customer group that usually sets trends. So the final question isn't whether Apple will win or not, but rather, when Apple decides to act, will the audience still have enough patience to wait for them one more time? And that's when we need to look at the bigger picture. This isn't just a battle between two companies, but a shift in how humans will define a phone in the future. Samsung is one step ahead while Apple is waiting for the right moment. One side chooses experimentation, accepting risk to pave the way. The other side chooses to observe, perfect, and only appear when things are ripe enough. The issue isn't about who's right and who's wrong, and that leads to a bigger question for the users themselves. Do you want a phone that always feels familiar, or a device that makes you feel like technology is moving forward? Are you willing to trade stability for new experiences? Or do you believe Apple will eventually make everything better, just later? Leave a comment below. Are you using an iPhone or a Samsung? If you were to get a new phone today, what would you choose and why? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe for our next interesting video coming soon. This is Kyle, and you are watching Beyond Economy.